Hi, and welcome to Rossi Audio. And this is a review of the MX400 from Cerwin-Vega that I have posted a few videos of. Um, I posted one video that was kind of like just for half a minute or almost a minute or something like that, where I played Toni Braxton, a female vocalist, because female vocalists can really point out problems with your mid-range. If it doesn't sound credible, and if it sounds cold and almost sterile, um, then you know that the mid-range is not following up. So I used that one for that purpose. Then I hooked up my laptop and I run the signals via the headphone jack using a cable that has a mini jack on one end and two phono plugs on the other end, and I hooked it up to the tuner input on the amplifier. And I used the Yamaha that you see here. It's a on the paper it's 20 watts per channel, so 2 by 20 watts. I also used another amp. It was an old hybrid Pro amp, PA amp, which has about 125 watts per channel, just to see if there was a big difference when I changed the amps, and yes, there was, as it normally should be. I then played some instrumentals just to see how they were on reproducing different types of instruments, like drums, guitars, and stuff like that. Because most Cerwin-Vegas can pound hard rock and metal all day long. They can produce, enormous sound pressure levels with electronic music, dance, trance, techno, that kind of stuff. So we all know that they can do that in a very good way. That was not what this test was all about. And not what this review is all about. This review is more about other types of music, more instrumental, more voices, stuff like that. So how do they stack up? Well, they are in the same class as the DX9, AT15, AT100, D9, VA38, VS150, RE38, sorry. VS150, LS15, E715, E315, and you get the point. All the big box speakers with 15-inch woofers, they are in the same class as all the other ones. I am not going to do them a comparison of them against models before 1984. I'm kind of like taking them and putting them up against models that came from 84 and until today, not including the new stuff because it's not in my wheelhouse or not something that I even want to do. So we're excluding the CLS, we're excluding the CLSC and the XLS and the SL and the VE. We're excluding those models because they can't stack up against the old stuff anyway. So, when that is said, I have to say, I like the looks of the MX400. They only came in black, so there's no wood color vinyl veneer on them, only black. You can only get them as black. They came as two different models, MX400 and then the MX250. The MX250 was a three-way with 12-inch instead of a 15-inch. That one I have not tested yet. I have not done a review on that one yet. That might come in the future. So, what models is normal for the MX400 to have butts and heads up against? Well, we will normally say like D9, DX9, VS150, and the RE38, the AT15/AT100, and LS15. Those are the models that we can normally compare them against, and of course AL1000, 1002 and stuff like that. So, as you can see, it is a three-way speaker with a 15-inch woofer. It has a mid-range and a horn tweeter, and I just love this horn tweeter. They have used it in many models, in D series and a few others. You can almost say that it is a cousin. It is a D9 cousin. It's a cousin of the D9 on steroids. The D9 plays well and very, to me, plays very correct. So many people would say, but the D9 has two mid-ranges. This only has one. Is the D9 better than the MX400 in the mid-range? No. The tweeters are about the same because it's the same tweeter and more or less almost the same crossover. So the tweeter in the MX and the D9 is very similar. There is a little bit, there's a sub little tiny difference. I think it's because of the cabinet, but they are about the same. The mid-range, I want to say, even though this one only have one mid-range and the D9 have two, the mid-range in this one sounds better and is more detailed than in the D9. The woofer section in this one, as you can see now, I have different woofers in it. So it's not the original woofer that is in there because they are being refoamed. So, but I have heard these with the original woofers before, so I know how they work. The woofer section in the MX400 is way beyond the D9. Where the D9 can play loud and have a good punch, the MX400 has a more richer bass. I want to say more kind of like a more mature bass. It's more distinct, it's more detailed than the D9. So the D9 cannot touch the MX400. So let's then move on to the AT15/AT100. Same thing there. You have two mid-ranges in the AT series, but you have a soft dome tweeter and you have a 15-inch woofer. How does the AT stack up against the MX or the other way around? Well, the MX400 easily outperforms the AT15 when it comes to richness and bass. The AT15 plays loud, it has bass too, but there is something about this speaker and the way it performs in the lower frequency range that is just different from the other two that I mentioned already. So the AT15 that I love the sound in them, cannot touch the MX400 when it comes to even overall sound, SPL, sound quality, detail, and stuff like that. So that brings me to the VS150. How does the VS150 stack up against the MX400? Or let me say, how does the MX400 stack up against the VS150? Well, I have always praised the mid-range and the VS150 for being very, very good, and it is. It's one of the better that Cerwin-Vega have ever made. And in that cabinet. For some reason it works perfectly in that cabinet. So the VS150 mid-range can run toe-to-toe with the MX400 mid-range. They are both very, very good. I can't really say that one is better than the other. Tweeter-wise, and how the tweeter interacts with the mid and the crossover slopes and the cutoffs and all that stuff, I feel is better in the MX. There's more dynamic in the transition between the mid-range and the tweeter in the MX. The lower frequency range in the woofer section, again, the MX is untouchable. The VS plays good in the bass, have good low frequency reproduction, pounds hard and all that stuff, but again, there is something about this speaker in the low frequency range that is just so correct. So the VS150 can go toe to toe with the MX on certain parts, but not as a whole complete speaker. That brings me to the RE38, and let me just say it right away. RE38 is no match for the MX400. RE38 is maybe the speaker of the modern ones, except for the E300 series, that I don't like as much as the others. So the RE38 cannot touch the MX400 on any level. No. That brings me to the LS15. LS15 can probably put out the same amount of bass in SPL and in richness and in volume and all that stuff, and have the same body and have the same fullness when you listen to it. But it's not as detailed, it's not as correct, it's more of a rumbly, boomy bass in the LS. Mid-range and tweeter in the LS15 is miles behind the MX, so that can't even be compared. So as a complete speaker, the LS15 cannot compete with the MX400. AL 1000 and 1002 and all that stuff, yes, they play loud, but overall sound cannot match the MX400. No. I've heard them and they cannot match them. This is a better speaker than the AL. Doesn't matter if you have the first, second, third, or fifth, or 10th version of the AL. You know what I mean. That brings me to the E series, E300, the 315, and the E715. They fall flat. They can't even touch. They don't even come close to the MX400. So I'm not going to give a very, very deep explanation on that. But they cannot touch the MX400. The only model that Cerwin-Vega have since, in hi-fi, since 1984 and up until today, that can somewhat go toe-to-toe with the MX400 is the DX9. And here is why. Both speakers have a very, very good horn tweeter that is very crisp, very detailed, and with the right crossover and the crossover points and slopes and all that stuff, and have a good interaction with the mid-range, and placed correctly in a cabinet, they function very well, both of them. Mid-range, I want to say that the DX9 mid-range is maybe a hairline better than the MX. When I say a hairline better, it is because it's bigger, so it has more richness and more information to it. They are both just as detailed. There's no difference there. They're both detailed. They're both correct, but there's a little bit more volume behind voices in the DX9. And I'm not talking about this much. It's like you can barely hear it, but if you have listened to these speakers many, many times over many, many years or something like that, you will start to recognize sudden things that pops up, and you know songs that you can put on to test things. So a hairline ahead of the MX400 is the DX9. Remember, the tweeters are equal. Now we come to the bottom part. And here's where it's going to get a little bit controversial, and people will go like, I don't agree with that. Well, unless you have heard both, you can't really state anything. I have heard both. I have owned both. I have played on both many, many times over a long period of time. And let me tell you, even though the DX9 has a bigger motor on the woofer, it does not play better. The bass and the woofer and the low frequency reproduction in the MX400 is a hairline better than the DX9. There's not much difference. There's not a huge difference. but there is a little bit, and here's why. The DX9 has the same problem as many of the other big box Cerwin-Vega speakers. It has a very rich, overwhelming, earth-shaking, earthquake bass, okay? That's typical for Cerwin-Vega. So does the MX400. But where the MX400 excel away from the DX9 is in the upper lower frequency range, from about 120 hertz up to about 250. That's where this one is better. Where the DX9 can have some bleeding, and when I say bleeding, I mean voices, and you have information from the mid-range in the upper woofer area. This one don't. I don't know what they had done with this one or what's different with the crossover in here, but there is minimal of bleeding down and up where the crossover points are. Most Cerwin-Vegas have a little bit of bleeding. That's why I recommend most Cerwin-Vega owners to upgrade their crossovers. But the MX400 has very, very little bleeding. So when you listen to the MX400, the upper woofer area from, let's say, 120 hertz and up to where it crosses over, I think this crosses over right around 380, 400 somewhere. From 120 and up there, there's very detailed, it's very crisp, it's very correct. It just projects the sound the way it should do, with very little bleeding from the mid-range. Then in the lower part, you don't have the same problems here as you have in many of the bigger Cerwin-Vegas, where in the bottom, depending on the amp, of course, if you use an amp like this one, 20 watts and up to 125, the lower frequency area is going to sound a little rumbly because you don't get the tightness that a bigger and more powerful amp can give you. But then again, it should be the same on both speakers with both amps, but it's not. So it's less rumbliness in the lower part of this one. It's more defined, it's more correct. Does that mean that the DX9 plays deeper and sounds deeper? No. They play as both play as deep as each other. It's just that this one is more refined and more tight and more to the point and have more punch, even down into the 30s and 20s, where the DX9 can sound a little bit dull and a little bit warm and comfy, and I don't know how to describe it. You know, it's just, if you take the MX400 and you look at what it does below 50 hertz, and let's say from 50 to 26, and you take the DX9 from 50 to 26 hertz, what happens in that area is a tiny little difference, because where the DX9 can sound a little round and hollow, this one sounds more square and tight. It's almost like the DX9 is playing with an echo. There you go. It's almost like the DX9 has an echo in the bottom. This one don't. And to me, that is more correct. You should not have a boomy echo in the bottom. I'm not saying that the DX9 is bad for that. I'm not saying that is a very big problem, because it's not. It is more of a problem when you use small and medium-sized amplifiers. When you go up in amplifier size and power, then the problem becomes less noticeable. But then again, this one comes equally better too. I did a test this morning on it with my 275 watt Carver, but it's only for like 10-15 minutes, and I can tell you it was night and day difference. But I can't use that in this review because I didn't test my DX9 with that Carver amp. So I'm just using the amps that I have tested both with. So based on that, the MX400 as a complete speaker is a little bit better than the DX9. I have said all along that the D9 and the AT15 and the DX9 has been my favorite big box speaker since 1984, and I still stand behind that. The D9 and the AT15 and the DX9 is very good speakers, and I just love them to death. And they're still number 2, 3, and 4 on my list, but I do have a number 1 on my list, the MX400. This is clearly, and I mean clearly and by good margins, the best big box speakers that I have heard from Cerwin-Vega since 1984. Of course, there's models I haven't heard, so I'm excited to get my hands on some PD9 to see if that can be, because PD9 should be somewhere in the middle between this one and the D9. But what does make this speaker so good? Because I mean they use they use the same recipe for most of the speakers, okay? So there shouldn't be much difference. So what is making it so different than the others? I mean, we have the same tweeter as used in many other models. We have the same mid-range as used in many other models. We have the same type of woofers that are used in many other models, with a little bit of difference. So what is the main difference on this one? I think that the clue and the success to the MX400 lays in the combination of the drivers, the placement of the drivers, and the crossover. It's not a very special crossover compared to many other models, but I think it's crossed very correctly. And for some reason, it bleeds very little. Another thing that I want to point out that I think can have some impact on the sound and why it's so better is the cabinet. The cabinet is different built than most of the other big box speakers from Cerwin-Vega. If you look at them, I haven't measured it, so I really can't say, but they look to me to be deeper, more narrower, but deeper. And that is a recipe for good sound. You want to have a speaker that is deeper when you use big woofers. The height and the width does not matter. You want to make them as narrow as possible and as deep as possible, because that's the way the airwaves and the sound waves travels. So with a big woofer, you want to have as much clearance behind the woofer as possible. And I think these are somewhere between 1/2 inch and 1 inch deeper than the other ones. I can't say for sure, but it looks like it. So they are about the same height, maybe a little bit more narrow than the AT and the DX and the other ones. There's another thing with this one. If you look at most other speakers from Cerwin-Vega that are in the big box category, and you look at the footing on them, the footing is inverted from the speaker itself. So there's about 1.5 inches, 2 inches on each side and front and back, where the footing or the pedestal is mounted. That gives the speaker a less surface area to the floor, which should be, in practical terms, mean less transferring of bass to the floor and walls and structure. But for some reason, I don't think that is the case. Because if you look at the MX400, the footing on this goes flush with all 4 walls. So the footing on this one is just as big as the speaker itself, which makes the speaker very stable. It doesn't move. And you know, when you start playing with these and you put 400 or 500 watts on these, there is vibrations involved and there is friction involved. So if you have a more, bigger footing, more square inches to plant the speaker on the floor, I think it's going to stabilize the speaker during playing. I think you will resolve some of the what I call internal vibration in the cabinet itself. You can do that with several things. You can use crossbars to stiffen up the cabinet, but also the footing on the cabinet has an impact. So of course on the other models where you have a very small base, a very small pedestal to have the speaker standing on the floor with, I'm not saying that it's wobbly or can tilt or whatever, but it is somewhat more wobbly than this because this one has a full footing. Just look at it. I mean, it has the whole bottom is the foot, and in between, under it, there's air. So the speaker itself is not on the floor compared to the other models. It's just that the footing on this one has a bigger surface area to stand on the floor with, which I think has an impact on the bass because it makes the speaker more steady during playing. So that I think has a big impact on the sound. So what else can I say about them? Besides that they look good compared to many other models, and I like the black look. That's why I like the black AT series, and I like the black VS, and I like this look. It also has a very high sensitivity. I mean, the MX250 is like 107, and this MX400 is 105, and that is way above any other big box speakers. You can, I mean, even DX9, AT15, and all the other ones are not even close. So, like I said, I have had my favorites for many years, and I still do, but this is the one on top of the list right now. Is there other speakers out there from Cerwin-Vega that sounds better than this MX400? Oh yeah. But they're not even the same type of speakers, and they can't even be compared. I'll just answer because I'm going to get this question anyway. Which speaker sounds better than this one? I can tell you right off the bat, even though I haven't heard this model, the SR2 I'm pretty darn sure will sound better than this one. And then you have some older models, probably maybe not in the bass, but better sound quality, like S1 and S2 probably have better sound quality. But for me, ultimately, the best sounding Cerwin-Vega speakers of all time is no doubt is the Vega 500, the corner horn. No one comes even close to it, not even this. This one doesn't come even close to it. So, but this is the best so far of the box speakers, the big box speakers from Cerwin-Vega. I hope that answered your questions, and I mean, try and get a pair. Go out and buy a pair and compare them to what you already have or have had. I'm pretty sure they're going to rock your socks off, both in SPL and in sound quality. They can play extremely loud with extremely powerful bass, but they also have an extremely good sound quality. That's it, guys.